Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today, the long-awaited review of the Epiphone 50s Les Paul Standard. So Epiphone at the 2020 Winter NAMM show basically mirrored Gibson's offerings from last year in introducing a modern and an original collection, as well as introducing this, the return of the Epiphone Kalamazoo headstock shape. And there's a lot of people excited about this because they didn't like Epiphone's old headstock style. On the Les Paul side of things, the original collection features a Les Paul Junior and Special, the standard 50s and 60s, though only in humbucker formats for now, so they don't have the P90 version that the Gibson has, but it also offers something that the Gibson one does not at this time, the Les Paul Custom. As the name implies, the standard 50s and 60s from the Epiphone collection is built to mirror the 50s and 60s standard from Gibson. I don't have one of those right now, but that's essentially what the / Les Paul Standard is, as well as a 50s. So this is a side-by-side comparison. What's the biggest difference? Your body shape is a little bit different on the Epiphone. This uses a poly finish, whereas this has the true Gibson nitrocellulose finish. You've got different hardware on these guys, different pickups, but their electronics are actually supposed to be the same, with 500K CTS pots wired in 50s style. The materials that make these guys up are similar, but the fretboards are different, and well, your headstock is still a different shape, but, getting closer here. But we'll talk about the / standard another day. So besides the upgraded wiring harness on these guys, they're also rumored on their spec sheet to have a long neck tenon, which is something that the 50 standards do not have. It's a super 50 spec that would be interesting to see on these guys. But other than that, these are just meant to emulate the Gibson variant of these, to have beautiful maple tops on them, and all the colors that you're used to seeing within their lineup. And the difference between the 50s and 60s standards are the colors and the neck profile. So the 50s neck is going to be a larger, more rounded neck profile shape, whereas the 60s is more of a thin, slim taper. So that all comes down to preference, and the 50s standard comes in a metallic gold top finish, a heritage cherry sunburst, and this one, vintage sunburst. Whereas the 60s, they get a pure ebony finish with a bourbon burst as well as an iced tea option. So now that we know about these guys, what are my first impressions of this thing? If you watched the unboxing episode, my first impressions were not that good of this guitar. It was definitely not set up at the factory very well. There's a lot of things that I had to do to make this guitar a better playing instrument. But ultimately, I think these things were just overhyped at NAMM. I remember going to Sweetwater when the original Gibson versions were released, and that's a memory that I will think of my entire life. Picking up that brand new guitar and actually thinking, there is something extremely special about these new guitars. There was a period of time where it's like, why does it even make sense to buy a used instrument at this time? So when I opened up this thing, I was kind of hoping for the same euphoria moment, and it's like, nope. This definitely still looks like an Epiphone. These things photograph really well, but in person, it's still just a pretty nice Epiphone. And I think that comes down to some slightly sloppy craftsmanship on the finish, as well as just the whole poly finish and a few other things. When you're as well versed in Les Pauls as I am, that's when you can look at an Epiphone and go, that's not right, that's not right, that's not right. But these aren't supposed to be Gibson killers. They're just meant to be a more affordable version of that. So we need to grade this based on that scale. So with that in mind, it is a pretty nice top, and it's got some good weight to it. It's not overly heavy. It's very similar in feel to the Gibson variants. And overall, it feels like a pretty good quality instrument. I mean, nothing really stands out from afar that makes this thing look bad. But the one thing that is really not jiving with me about this guitar is the neck profile. It's not the same as the 50s Gibson standard. So this has a lot of shoulder to it. So it feels like it's a huge baseball bat neck, but then the back side of it actually gets flat. It's really strange. Not my favorite neck profile in the world, but the more and more you play it, the more you get used to it. So with these guys clocking in at $599, I was a little bit disappointed at first, but let's go ahead, throw it on the workbench, take a look at its individual parts and specs, and then get to the playing demo before I draw my final conclusions. Inside the 50s Les Paul Standard, let's find out, does it truly have a neck tenon that is long? Yep, it does. So I guess in that aspect, it's actually better spec'd than the Gibson version. I don't build guitars. I can't imagine it would be that much more expensive to produce the long neck tenon, but I find it funny that they'll do it on the Epiphone, but they won't do it on the Gibson USAs. Essentially, the only reason why they don't do that is so they can charge you a premium for the custom shop stuff. But our pickups here are the Epiphone Pro Buckers 2 and 3. You can see this one was made in November of 2019, as was this one. And within the circuit, the bridge pickup reads about 8.13, the neck pickup is a little bit less hot at 7.43, and the middle position, just for fun here, about half that, 388. Something that does disappoint me is the first Epiphone that I reviewed from the 2020 series, it actually had that braided shielding wiring. But the Classic had this style because it had 4 conductor wiring. I was a little bit sad to see that since this is just 2 conductor wiring. I was hoping we would see the braided wiring, but I guess not. But the routes are looking pretty good here, so they did a nice job there. And you can see it is a full maple cap. You can see where that mahogany body begins, and the maple top joins right there. But typically with these Epiphones, what they do is they put plain maple and then a very fancy veneer over that. I can't really see where that would begin or end, but that would be my best guess, because I don't think there's any way they can actually put a real flame maple top on these guys at $600. The bridge pickup cavity had quite a bit of a disappointment right here. Normally there's like a nice QR code there and has your serial number on it as well, but it looks like that got torn at the factory. It's not really a big deal, it's mainly used for factory identification anyways. But if you're trying to help identify your guitar, you know, in the future when this isn't the latest and greatest thing, that might make it more difficult. That also exposes an area where the wood has not been finished over, so that's just kind of cool for us to see. The hardware is pretty much the same as the other Epiphones we were looking at. It's Epiphone branded and it's the Locktone series, so they have those little barbs on them that make it so it won't just fall off. This one's actually not quite as tight as some of the other ones I've had. And the tailpiece has that similar thing going on right there, also branded Epiphone on the back. Moving around the body, as far as the electronics go, your typical 3-way toggle switch on an Epiphone, a little bit noisier than the Gibson variant. You also have a different style securing nut. The Gibson version has a skirted one that falls down flat. But the flame top's pretty good on this one. I don't really like the pinstripey stuff like this one. I prefer it to have a little bit more wave, but it definitely gives you that cool flame top vibe. Now, usually this is the part where I complain about the knobs, and they did a little bit better job this time of like getting it to where Gibson normally puts the 10s, but you can see like this is all the way on, it's slightly off, it's slightly before, slightly off, and this one's like right on, so they got close this time. And you can opt to take the pickguard off if you wish. You would just have these screw holes left over. The pickguard doesn't really have anything crazy going on. As far as QC goes on the finish of the body, I'm noticing a lot of sloppy areas. This is one that particularly bugs me because the finish got all the way on top of that. It looks very sloppy, and there's quite a few areas where that's actually occurred on this thing. So it's a minor nitpicky thing, but I really think they could have done a little bit better on the finish work. But a couple steps back, you know, everything looks good. So 2-piece maple top on a solid mahogany body. Now this is a little bit fishy in my opinion. According to Epiphone's website, the 60 standards just have a glued-in neck tenon, so they might not actually have the long neck tenon of the 50s. But you'll notice that it says it's an Indian Laurel fretboard. Now if you go to the 50s side of things, it does not tell you what the fretboard is made of at all. I had to go to a few dealers' websites where they list it as Indian Laurel. Doing research for these videos, I like to go to the source, but I find a lot of discrepancies and things missing on these listings that they still need to work on for their website. This one doesn't appear to be quite as porous as the last ones, and it doesn't quite have that brighter color to it. I was almost tricked into thinking that this one was rosewood. But that sits on top of a mahogany neck, so that's something else that's different from the Gibson iteration. But these guys are rocking the typical 12-inch radius from the Gibson Epiphone family of things, with 22 frets that are medium jumbos, and the traditional 24 3/4-inch scale length. And they've got a Graphtec nut on here. It's supposed to be self-lubricating, but I just put it in there anyways. But our nut width is 1.68 inches, and by the 12th it increases to 2.09. First fret neck depth, it looks like 0.9, then goes up to 1.01 at the 12th. So same as the one we reviewed yesterday, the Telecaster Broadcaster. But at the same time, I mean, this is a completely different feeling neck as compared to that one because it's got a slightly wider feel here. Lastly, we've got the acrylic inlays here on the fretboard. Moving on to the face of the headstock, I noticed that there is a hole. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be there or if that was accidentally put there, but hey, that's where you adjust your truss rod if you need to. The truss rod cover itself reads standard. And you don't get a blank one in the case like you do with the Gibson iterations. And here's that new Epiphone headstock style. Moving on to the backside here, you can also see that they cap the back off with a very nice looking veneer, so it's got a little bit of flame figuring to it. Kind of similar to the Sapele style wood, whatever it is, you got that nice figuring there. But they do that in order to mask how many pieces the body is. I'm seeing a 3-piece myself, so you got one chunk right here, then you got another chunk that kind of just ends right there. So that's another difference between the full Gibson version, is usually those will have either a 1-piece or a 2-piece body instead of 3 pieces. But this was supposed to be a big selling feature. Does it have the CTS pots? Yes it does. It's also supposed to have 50s wiring, but can you really count this as 50s wiring if they're using a quick connect system? What they've actually done here is it is all hand wired because they actually wire this little connector to the pot, but they're still using the other style ProBucker pickups that just use the quick connect system here. So that's good for you because it's kind of like the best of both worlds kind of. So if you want to try a different Epiphone pickup out, you could easily swap those in and out without having to do any additional soldering work. But for the purists, we might not like that. But these are CTS pots 500K. So they definitely lived up to their expectations here and their promises. As far as the route goes here, everything's looking pretty good. I don't see anything too crazy going on. And everything's looking good underneath our toggle switch cavity as well. Moving along the side, they also gave it the thin binding in the cutaway, so that's a nice little 50 spec feature right there. And our output jack is also a kind of a thick plastic right here. And the strap buttons are the large ones with the felt washers to help secure them on both the top and bottom. So now moving on to the neck, it is kind of a 1-piece mahogany neck in a roundabout way. I mean, you've got the heel cap right here, that's something else grafted on, and you've got a scarf joint up here making up the headstock, but the neck itself it appears to be 1 piece. That's got a glossy finish over top of it. You've got your Made in China sticker right there, and the serial number dates this one to November of 2019, so this is one of the early ones. And the tuners, once again, read Epiphone Deluxe and are Clusen in style. All said and done, I've got it set up with a little bit of relief in the neck. I'm not in love with the action on this one. It seems to be more of a medium action, but that's the best I can do without it, buzzing out in multiple locations and to clear some of these other frets. I still have a little bit of buzzing in that around that 4th to 5th fret area. So as far as the frets on this one, they're not too bad. They're workable. It's a playable guitar, but there's definitely some work that could be done to get it to perfection. But it's definitely a lot more playable now than it was out of the box. This example weighs 9 pounds, 9.7 ounces, so fairly similar to the Gibson iteration. But let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds. What are my final thoughts on the Epiphone 50s Les Paul Standard? Despite not, flooring me at first, once I plugged this thing in, got it set up a little bit better, I was definitely impressed. I mean, it's not the best playing guitar, but it's definitely good within this budget if you need a brand new Les Paul. Now, if you're open to a bunch of other body shapes and styles, there are a ton of guitars you can buy for $700 brand new. But as far as beautiful Les Pauls, these are definitely a good value. And I'll be honest, I wasn't really feeling playing guitar today, but when I plugged this thing in, started to noodle around on it, that's when it did start to inspire me to play some other stuff, and that's when I got really into this thing. Now, for me personally, I really like the neck pickup. The neck pickup is awesome. I also like that middle position. The bridge pickup, yeah, it needs a little bit more crunch to it, I think, but for the most part, I think you'll definitely be happy with these pickups. But you can definitely upgrade them in the future. It's not that hard to do since these are 500K CTS pots. I mean, you could put Gibson pickups in here, relatively easily. Or Seymour Duncans, whatever ones you want. As far as tuning stability, I didn't notice anything too crazy. I was doing some pretty big bends on this thing, and it's not like I have to do super tune-ups. I mean, yeah, you still have to do some fine tweaks, but these tuners, they definitely feel good. So while this example might not have been perfect, we might have a few fret leveling issues to go over if I was trying to dial this down into super, super low action. But as it sits now, yes, I would recommend you try one of these things out because, for the price point, once again, if you need a brand new Les Paul, they're a lot cheaper than the Gibson variation, and they get you pretty close if this is all you can afford. But the feel of this one compared to the Gibson variant, completely different night and day. So while these are good guitars, they're not going to replace Gibsons by any means. So, I hope you troglodytes enjoyed learning about the Epiphone 50s Les Paul Standards and my opinions on it today. I don't believe anybody ordered this one through the New Guitar Day program, so you can check out that link in the description if you are interested in being the next owner of this one. You can also email me directly about this one at austin@troglysguitarshow.com for $525 shipped. But before we say goodbye, let's take a look under Blacklight. This one's actually looking pretty cool. We got a bunch of glowing for a brand new guitar. Kind of turns into this alien green sunburst finish. But our inlays are also glowing a cool hue. I mean, just in case you're curious why this is happening, it's because this actually will tell you if there's been a break, crack, or repair to the guitar, and it's mainly used for vintage instruments. It's just kind of a part of my channel if you're new here. So everything's looking good here. Let's go ahead and check out the box. If you purchase one of these online, this is all the case candy that you'll receive. So you get the Epiphone sticker. It tells you about the new bone nut by Graphtec. You get a cool little Epiphone poster that you can hang up if you want to and see all the different models, as well as the owner's manual and your kind of a warranty type card. So this kind of hugs the body right there, kind of makes it like a double-walled box. They have some pretty poor padding right here, but some padding's better than none. And then that keeps the headstock from floating around. And then your guitar is covered in this cheesecloth. So it's a nice little shipping system. You might even be able to find a way to attach a handle to this to use it as a makeshift case, because you do not get a case with these guys. If you got a case with these at $5.99, I think that would then be a fantastic deal. Thank you, Troglodytes, for tuning in today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care, and check out those links in the description.